Alright, so we have our back-end server set up with our routes. Now we're going to start to work on the client side, okay, which is Angular. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the Angular.io documentation, go down to where we have our package.json file and all that stuff. Alright, because we're not going to just simply clone the quick start like we've been doing, because some things have to be a little different since we're working in an existing application with a back end. Alright, but before we get into that, we need a folder to put all of our client side stuff. So let's go ahead and create a folder here, and we're going to call it client. Alright, now in order for this to work as a static folder, we have to go to our server.js file, and we have to just add a piece of middleware letting the system know that we want to use that as our static folder. Alright, so all we have to do is say app, I'm going to say app.use, and in here we're going to say express.static, and we're going to pass in path.join, parentheses, and double underscore dir name, and then the name of the folder that we want, which is going to be client. Alright, so that one line is going to let Express know that that's going to be our static folder. So let's save that. And then we want to create our package.json file in here. Now remember, we can use npm init, so we're going to go to our command line, and we want to navigate into the client folder. Okay, once we're in there, we can then run npm init. It's just going to ask some questions here. Let's say we want to call this mean to do's version. That's fine. We don't need a description. For the entry file, let's see. That doesn't really, we'll just keep it as index.js, and then just click enter through the rest of them. Alright, so now we have this package.json file inside the client. Okay, we do have one in the root of the server, but that's completely separate. Okay, so we have this one here. Now what we'll want to do is go to the Angular documentation, and we're going to grab everything here, copy it, and paste it in here. Make sure you put it in the one that's in the client folder. Alright, I'm just going to change this back to mean to do's. Okay, so we have all of our dependencies. We're using Angular. So let's save that. And then we're going to grab this here. This is for the tsconfig file. We'll copy that. And make sure you put this in your client folder. It's going to be a new file. And it's going to be called typing. Was it typings? Is that what we're doing? No, tsconfig. Let's see, it was rename. Rename to tsconfig.json. Oops, spelled that wrong. Okay, and then we're just going to open that up and paste that in, save it, and then we need typings.json. Paste that in, save it, and then system.js. Let's grab that. So that's system, what is it? js.config.js. And we'll paste that in and save it. Okay, so we get those 4 files set up. Now we want to go back into the command line, and we're going to run npm install, okay, from the client folder. And that should set up node modules folder right in the client folder. Okay, so now that those are set up, we're going to go back to the documentation, and I want to go down to where the index.html is, which is right here. Okay, and I'm going to copy that, And then I actually decided to put this in the views folder inside of our index. We're actually not going to use EJS here. Okay, we're going to rename this to index.html. Okay, because we're not going to need to use EJS in this file. This is basically just a gateway for our Angular application. So let's paste that in, change the title. We'll change it to mean to-dos. And we have a link to styles CSS, so we're going to create that in the client folder. Okay, we can use that for our style sheet. Alright, and back to the index.html file. Since we're in the client folder, this is the static root folder, so we don't need to change the path for these node modules. Okay, we can leave that. And then the rest of this stuff should be alright for now, so let's save it. And now we can start to create our Angular structure. So in the client folder, we're going to create another folder called app. And inside that, we're going to create a file called main.ts. And in the documentation, let's find where that is, which is right here. So we're going to copy that. Alright, so basically we're just bringing in Bootstrap and the main app component, which we haven't created yet, and then we're just going to run the Bootstrap function around that app component. Okay, so once that's saved, let's create our main app component. So in the same level, we're going to create app.component.ts. And let's see, we can just grab this right here. Alright, so selector is my app. Alright, and that looks good. Let's save it. And then what we'll do is go into our command line and get out of the client folder. So we'll say cd ... That brings us into the mean to-dos folder. And then we're going to run npm start. Alright, so let's see what this says right here. Dir name is not defined. Okay, so that's in the server.js. Let's see, what did I do here? Oh, it looks like I have 3 underscores. That should be 2 underscores. Alright, so let's try that again. npm start. Okay, server started on port 3000. If we go back, let's just go to localhost 3000. Okay, so failed to look up view index in views directory. So what we want to do is go to our route, which is in routes, and then index, and we just want to add on to this .html and save. Okay, and then we'll just restart. Okay, so it's looking for module HTML. So since we're using the EJS view engine, we need to just excuse me, add a line right here. We're going to say app.engine, and we're going to pass in HTML, and then here we're going to require EJS, and then we can just add on here .render file. That F should be uppercase. Alright, and that should take care of being able to render HTML files. Alright, so let's go and run npm start and reload. Okay, so we're getting loading, and if we look in our index.html, we have loading here, and then main.js is not found. That's because we haven't compiled the main.ts file yet. So what we'll do is go back into our command line, and we're going to go into the client folder, cd client, and we want to compile it. So we'll say npm run tsc:\w, and that's going to compile it into a JS file. Alright, so you can see over here now all those TS files have been compiled. Alright, so now we should be good. So we'll Control C and then go back cd dot dot and then npm start. And now we have our Angular 2 application running on the server. Alright, so what I want to do now is we're going to be using Twitter Bootstrap in our front end, and I want to set it up a little different than we have been. Okay, we've been using the CDN, but I want to bring it into our application, and we're going to use something called Bower, okay, or Bower. And Bower is basically a front-end dependency manager. It works very similar to installing modules with NPM, except NPM is on the server side for the most part. So what we want to do is install Bower globally by saying npm install, and then we want to add -g, that's a flag for global, and then Bower, or Bower. I've heard it pronounced both ways, and I actually pronounce it both ways. Alright, so that's all set. Now we want to create a Bower bower.json file. And just like with npm, we can say bower init. And oh, you know what? We can't run it from this git bash. For some reason, it doesn't really work well with this command line, this git bash. So I'm just going to open a standard Windows command prompt as administrator. And we're just going to navigate to that folder. Projects. Alright, so let's say bower init. Okay, so it's going to ask us for the name. That's fine. Description. Let's say simple to-dos app. We're just going to choose the default for the rest of these. Alright. Looks good, yes. Okay, so now that we have that set up, we need to specify where we want our Bower components to be installed. Alright, I don't want them in the root, I want them to go in the client. So what we need to do is create a special file here in the root directory. So file, and it's going to be called .bower rc. Okay, and then all we need to do is put in an object and say directory, and then we're going to set that to client / bower _ components and save. Alright, so now what we want to do is go back to our command line, and let me just clear that. And we're going to say bower install bootstrap and just add -- save. Okay, so we'll let that run. And now you can see over in the client folder we have a Bower components folder that has bootstrap and jQuery, since that's a dependency in order to use the bootstrap JavaScript file. Alright, and you'll see we have the dist folder, has the CSS files and all that good stuff. Alright, so now that we have that, we'll go into our index.html file, which is in the views folder, and up here let's add a link rel style sheet, and then href. That's going to be Bower components / bootstrap / dist / css / bootstrap.css. Alright, and then let's also include the JavaScript down at the bottom right before the ending body tag. So this will be a script tag with a source attribute, which will be Bower components / let's do we'll include jQuery first. So jQuery / dist / jQuery.js. Alright, and then we'll copy that. And now for the bootstrap.js file, which is in bootstrap / dist / js / bootstrap.js. Save that. All right. Okay, so let's go start the server and see if that takes effect. So we can say npm start. Alright, so now you can see the fonts change, so we know that Bootstrap is enabled. So we're going to go ahead and stop here, and in the next video we're going to start to work on the Angular app and the to-dos component and user interface. So I will see you then.